Welcome to Living the Smarter Science of Slim, where we provide a scientifically proven lifestyle for long-term health and fat loss by eating more and exercising less, but smarter.
Eat smarter, exercise smarter, live better. I am so ready for that.
Hey everyone, Jonathan Bailor back with another bonus Smarter Science of Slim podcast. Uniquely excited for today's show. We have literally the internet's leader in nutrition information, and that's saying a lot because there's a heck of a lot of people out there putting information on the internet. You've all heard of him. You've all hopefully very much enjoyed his work as much as I have. He's a New York Times best-selling author, was also voted in 2009 as the ultimate wellness game changer by the Huffington Post. You've seen him in Time Magazine, the LA Times, Chicago Magazine, on CNN, Fox News, ABC News, The Today Show, CBS's Washington Unplugged. He's provided over 300,000 online articles. He doesn't accept any sponsorship from third parties or from pharmaceutical interests. He's out there trying to help us live better on a massive scale. Dr. Mercola, welcome to the show, and thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Jonathan. Thank you for such a tremendous introduction. It's probably one of the best introductions I've ever had, so thanks.
Well, thank you for what you do, Dr. Mercola. And I wanted to start the show. I know you're obviously a fountain of information about nutrition and exercise and all things health-related, but to do what you've done in terms of just influence, I wanted to rewind a little bit, and I know you've been a physician for over 25 years. How did you go from little, Dr. Mercola, to building the infrastructure and helping so many people like you're doing today?
Well, I've actually been a physician for 30 years, which provided the foundation for the information that I have, because I started out practicing traditional medicine. I had a job as a pharmacy apprentice before I went to med school, and was really brainwashed into the whole drug-reducing paradigm. Even though I understood the importance of exercise and nutrition, I didn't realize the answer. So it took me a while to come to that conclusion after practicing. And then in about the early 90s, I started developing an expertise in natural medicine. And then one of my passions all along has been technology. And I first took my first computer class in the 60s, late 60s. So it's always been an interest of mine. And then the internet came well, actually the web, the internet was developed in 68, but the web browsers came around in the mid-90s, and I jumped on the internet or the web shortly around that time and started a website. So I just realized that people would enjoy the information that I was learning and providing to the patients that I was seeing, because I've seen tens of thousands of patients use these principles and help get better. And it just seemed a tragedy that more people weren't aware of them, so I just shared it freely and provided the best information I knew, which actually built up my practice quite a bit. I had people coming from all over the world. Pretty much every day we have someone coming in from a different country. But interestingly, it was surprising to me that most of the time it wasn't any different than what I was telling them to do on my website, but they felt the need to come and see me and get the specifics for them. But almost all the time, the trip was unnecessary because I could have easily applied what I was saying on the internet and use it to treat their condition.
Dr. Mercola, having that classical training as a physician, how did you come out the other end? So, you're on the leading edge of the modern science of food and exercise being used as medicine, much of which flies in the face of what I am informed is still taught in medical schools, and you've stood your ground. How are you? What made you turn out so differently, let's say?
Well, I'm not the only person out there doing this. There are many, many physicians. There's thousands of physicians who understand it at a very deep level. And fortunately, I was able to connect with a large number of them in the early 90s, and they kind of mentored me in this process and catalyzed my own learning experience. Because when I remember very clearly on the first day of medical school, the very first day, they said, the vast majority, maybe even up to 90% of what we are going to teach here in the next 4 years will be outdated by the time you graduate. So what the goal is to teach you how to learn. And thank God we have the internet and all these journals. It is just with these resources that we have, everyone has. Just on your smartphone alone, you can basically become almost an expert in research if you're carefully research this information on the internet. So it's just a matter of knowing how to learn and research this topic. And and I was fortunate enough to understand communication skills, and I studied communication for about 7 years, and attempted to communicate them and translate the medical jargon into language that people can readily understand and apply, so that it isn't, because it's very difficult to read a medical study. I'm sure you've tackled some of them before, and it's really complex language that doesn't have to be complex, but that's the way the system's set up. So
Dr. Mercola, you certainly.
I basically served as an interpreter, which was, I think, one of the appeals of the information I was writing. I understood it from a first-hand basis, but then also was able to communicate it in a way that people understood.
So certainly you hit the nail on the head when you said there's such a wealth of information available to all of us now. The studies can absolutely be confusing. Another thing that I know that can be confusing that you can be a great resource for is anyone can go on the internet and find an MD who says with absolute certainty and who can provide studies in quotations showing that fat kills you. And then you have MDs on the internet providing studies saying that eating fat is the best way to not die. How do we make heads or tails of this debate?
Well, it's a great starting point, because I believe that fat is, in fact, indeed one of the most crucial aspects of your diet. And I personally believe that the vast majority of your diet should be consumed from healthy fat. By healthy fat, I mean mostly the animal fats and saturated fats, but certainly some vegetable fats, such as avocados and coconut oil and butter and eggs and nuts, specifically macadamia nuts. And personally, I consume about anywhere from 60 to 80% of my diet is fat, that's high quality fats. You want to stay away from the traditional fats that were initially promoted as being healthy, such as the vegetable oils, because they're full of omega-6 fats, which we get far too much of, and they're highly processed. Most of them are contaminated with GMOs and glyphosate and Roundup, which have loads of complications by themselves. So you focus on the healthy fats, and if you're having that much fat, you have to take something out of your diet. And what we're learning is that cutting back on the protein may be every bit as important as cutting back on the carbohydrates. So a simple version of what I've learned over all these years and condensed into a few sentences is that it's best to pretty much have unlimited carbohydrates as long as they're restricted to vegetables, typically green leafy vegetables, non-starchy vegetables. So if you have a large number of those, you don't even have to count them, just have as many as you want. And then have protein that typically is anywhere from 40 grams to 70, maybe 25% more if you're pregnant or you're exercising. And that's the only amount of protein you need, because if you get more, your body will actually convert that to carbohydrates. So we know that restricting carbohydrates and protein and focusing on healthy fats is really one of the most profoundly beneficial things you can do to reverse most of the chronic degenerative diseases and extend your lifespan.
So, Dr. Mercola, this is literally a perfect example of where people's brains can explode when it comes to nutrition, because with as much confidence, there are well-known physicians saying the exact opposite is true. How do we make heads or tails? There's literally people saying you should be eating, physicians, best-selling physicians saying you should be eating sub 10% of your calories from fat, because if you don't, it'll kill you. And then there's other physicians saying you should eat 90 plus, for lack of better terms, percent of your diet from fat, because if you don't, you're at risk of disease. Can they both be true? Well, sure, 80%. But you understand my point.
Sure. Yeah. Ultimately, you can study someone and you have favorite people who you trust, and then you could sort of bypass the step of validating things yourself. But if you really want to know, then you can just explore the studies and the research. And we've got plenty of the materials. When we write studies on our site at Mercola.com, and anyone can just go, there's a search engine box at the top of every page. You can type in a topic, and you'll come up with dozens, if not hundreds, of different articles, and each article is referenced to studies that there are links to, so you can go to the original research yourself and check it out. and then make your own conclusions. But most of this low-fat nonsense came from the 50s, a researcher, Ansel Keys, who essentially established these myths. And that's a failed experiment. Because there's only three nutrients you can have for proteins, carbohydrates, and fat. And you have low fat, that means you have to. There's no other question. You have to increase your protein and carbs. And that experiment has been done. We've done it for the last 50, 60 years. It doesn't work. We have an obesity epidemic. 2 out of 3 people listening to this are overweight. And 1 out of 3, and in some cases, 40, 45% of some states are obese. So, and that trend is not reversed. It's only getting worse. It's been getting worse for the last 20 years or so. So this is a failed experiment. It's just open your eyes and use the common sense God gave you. It's just really obvious. And then try it yourself. Ultimately, maybe it isn't right for you, but you try the process and see if your body tells you it's true. Your body is the arbiter of the truth for you. So it will give you feedback and let you know if that's something that's useful.
Another key thing that I think someone like you can help us with, Dr. Mercola, just given the breadth of information you cover and that comes across your desk and is provided on your website is, for example, we talk about eating unlimited non-starchy vegetables. We talk about limiting, if not completely eliminating, refined carbohydrate. And we talk about enjoying a lot and abundance of healthy fats. At the same time, there's all this talk about a bunch of other things like supplements, BPAs, fasting, just any number of topics. Where do you think we should stack rank, where we focus our attention? Like, should step 1 be cut out sugar, and step 2 is because it's so easy to get caught up in the minutia that people feel paralyzed.
Let me give you an example. I just hired about 7 or 8 weeks ago a person who's about my age, close to 60 years old, who is helping me with my gardening. And that's one of my next steps in evolution. Is what we're doing is high performance agriculture. So I'm doing some really incredible experiments with microbes and soil nutrients. So it was I love doing it, but I just had no more time. I was trying to get off my computer by 7, but I was getting off at 11. It wasn't a healthy approach. So I hired her, and she was the mother of the person that I knew well, lived locally. So I thought I'd give her a chance, and it worked out well. I mean, she's passionate about this. She likes the gardening. But here's the reason I'm sharing the example is that she came in and she was drinking Powerade, and you have to replace your water. So she was using that, thinking that it was going to give her energy because she was tired. Not only was she tired, she had arthritis, she had high blood pressure, and she was overweight. So this is an answer to your question. So this is what I would recommend to someone who's new to this. And the very first step is to drink the right fluid. So you have to stop everything but water. And we're doing new things now with vortexing the water, structuring it, and essentially converting it from H2O to H3O2, which is a whole other area of just enormous interest. But anyway, we put her on structured water, took her off all the Powerade, all the sugar, and then when she started doing that, then she still had arthritis and stuff, so we stopped the grains, and she was open to that, and the sugars, and just increased the vegetables and the healthy fats. And literally 7 weeks later, she just come back from her doctor yesterday. She had lost 20 pounds. Her arthritis was gone, and he's weaning her off all her medication. So this is exactly the miracle that can happen when you give your body what it needs and restrict giving it what it's not designed to have.
And given that foundational approach, what would be your advice, Dr. Mercola, to someone who is not yet drinking healthy natural fluids, who's not yet eating the healthy fats, who's not yet doing the vegetables, but takes all these supplements? What would be the advice to that person?
I would say go to the internet or a dictionary, prison dictionary, and look up the word supplement. If you do, you will find that the word means in addition to, not in place of. Supplements are not magic pills. Many people still are in the allopathic paradigm to think that a supplement is going to help them get better, and the solution is not. It's the more powerful, more foundational, more important principle is to eat the right foods and avoid the bad ones. So the very first step, as I said, is to drink healthy water. Clean, filtered water, and even better would be vortex water, water that is highly structured because it just nourishes your body at a far deeper, more profound level. So, and that's the first step. You've got to get that right first because it makes the average person is drinking 56 gallons of soda a year in the United States. And diet soda is worse than regular soda. We know that very clearly. It's fraudulently advertised. The studies show really clearly it causes you to gain more weight than regular soda. So if you're going to have soda, at least drink the regular sugar. Don't drink the diet stuff.
Certainly seems like maybe worrying about some of those supplement questions is a bit like worrying about a dirty windshield when your car's on fire. It's kind of like we got to put the car out first.
You have to put things in proper perspective. And supplements are useful. We have plenty of them on our site, but there's not the whole shot.
Well, and moving now on to exercise, you've done a great service in helping to extol the virtues, the more modern science, right? Like back in the 60s, it was all about aerobic exercise. Not to say that aerobic exercise is bad, but it seems there's been vast developments in that arena. Can you share with us some of the modern science of exercise?
I started exercising in 1968, so that's a long time, coming up on 45 years. It is 45 years. So, and I embraced that philosophy wholeheartedly. I read the book Aerobics by Dr. Ken Cooper in 68, and he's the person who coined that term. He actually invented it, aerobics, for exercise, at least as it relates to exercise. So I did a lot of long-distance running. In fact, I got relatively proficient at it and ran locally and ran a sub-250 marathon. But I did very little other types of exercise. And what we're finding now is that those exercises, even though they're probably better than nothing, they can cause lots of problems. They can cause metabolic disorders, cardiomyopathies, electrical disturbances in your system. So it's not the ideal form of exercise. And what we know is that performing high-intensity exercises that we coin peak fitness, where you're essentially warming up, going all out at a full intensity for 30 seconds or so, and then recovering for 90 seconds and repeating that in a cycle of about 6 to 8 times, and doing that for a total of 20 minutes of exercise, including warm-up and cool-down. Doing that a few times a week will provide you with probably more benefits than working out 4, 5, 6 hours or more aerobically. But so you need some high-intensity training, some stretching, some weights training. I think is useful, flexibility. And then here's the other thing that's even emerging. I don't know if you've read this on my site yet, but I've started to become concerned about a year or two ago when there was a study emerging showing that even highly fit, trained professional athletes, if they sat all day long, they were going to die prematurely, which is absolutely counterintuitive. So I was fortunate enough to connect with a researcher from NASA, one of the scientists responsible for the astronauts' health, and was doing it for 30 years, Dr. Joan Vernikos. And what her research paralleled exactly what's going on with this area, because when you sit, it's almost the same thing as microgravity, and you get the same degenerative changes that occur when you go in space. So thankfully, there's a simple solution. All you have to do is a non-exercise activity, which could be as simple as standing up every 10 minutes. And you can counteract the side effects from sitting down all day.
Dr. Mercola, when it comes to those short bursts of high-intensity training, what have you found if someone is morbidly overweight, which is the fastest growing percentage of our population when it comes to the overweight problem, how can someone who's 300 plus pounds start exercising in this way safely?
It's actually even easier for them, because when I say go all out full at high intensity, it's based on your specific metabolic needs. So essentially getting your heart rate up to about 220 minus your age. So for someone who weighs 300 pounds and they're carrying around maybe an extra 150, they're just walking is going to be a big thing. So maybe high-intensity exercise for them may be brisk walking, at least initially. And that's all they have to do until they can go as hard and fast as they can. I mean, they're not going to run. There's no way they're going to run, at least initially. But then as they become more fit over a few weeks and months, then they just increase the intensity, and they continue to increase it until they reach their equilibrium.
Dr. Mercola, certainly there's a lot of things in our society that are not optimal from a food and exercise perspective, and I think we're all aware of that. Is there a glimmer of hope, though? Do you see any trends that make you excited for the future, that make you think we can turn the tide against this epidemic?
I'm sure the internet is one of them, which is what helped bring my site to prominence and the information that I have. And as more and more people understand this and the truth gives up, because it's hard to suppress the truth. When you try these things and it changes your life, and more and more people start doing it. And people aren't stupid. They just know that's the case. When something works, and they tell their friends and their family.
And how did we get? Well, and how did we get so far off? I mean, both from an eating and an exercise perspective, it seems like the standard message that folks who haven't visited your site believe is just they just need to cut calories. It really doesn't matter where they get it from. They just need to eat less, and they just need to go do more aerobic exercise. They need to eat less and exercise more, whereas it seems what the science is actually showing is you need to eat more of the right foods and do less, but of higher intensity exercise.
Yeah, well, that's where science goes. It's not a static process. It's dynamic. We're always learning new information, which is one of the reasons I put the site together. Because I was always reluctant to write a book. I've written a few, but really, when you write a book, it's fixed and it's going to be outdated, usually before you even publish it. So when you have a website, you can update it in real time, and as the studies are published, you can respond to them. It's a lot more current. Now, and we know that a calorie is not a calorie, but for many of you people who want to lose weight, one of the most profoundly powerful interventions I found is not necessarily cutting your calories back significantly, but restricting the time that you're eating them. So essentially, not eating for 3 hours before you go to bed, and then gradually extend the time that you have breakfast, and eventually skipping it. So just restricting the time that you're eating to about 6 or 8 hours. And when you do that, you help shift your body's enzymes, because there's only two fuels you can burn, and it's sugar and fat. And most everyone listening to this, especially if you're overweight, it's 100% if you're overweight, is that your body is adapted to burning sugar as your primary fuel. That's why if you don't eat regularly, you get real tired and fatigued because you just run out of fuel, and you crave these sugars and bread and pasta. But once you shift over by restricting your calories, which is what our ancestors did, think about it. Do you think our ancestors had access to a grocery store 24/7 or a refrigerator? No, they went for times where they didn't eat regularly. So adapting an eating pattern similar to our ancestors is probably going to simulate what our own genes and biochemistry is optimized for. So when you do that, and you over time, your body shifts to burn fat as its primary fuel. And then when you're overweight, you can start using that fat instead of it just sitting there causing serious complications. So just pushing your body towards burning fuel, fat as your primary fuel, is a really powerful thing. And then the weight comes out like butter, melted butter. And interestingly, the most profound observation that I've noticed personally with friends and relatives is that there's no hunger, there's no craving. The desire for those foods just disappears. It's not like you have to have iron willpower and discipline to do it. It's just not there because you're burning fat, because you have another fuel source instead of sugar.
During that wonderful overview of what a lot of people are calling intermittent fasting, if I'm correct, you mentioned that eating in this way approximates more of what many of our ancestors may have faced. And then you also made an excellent point before that along the lines of the rate of change and how if you publish a book, like, is it just already out of date? Certainly that there's updated papers coming out time and time again. But are we also seeing that it's almost like old is new? I mean, the whole ancestral movement, whole just eat whole foods. I mean, yeah, papers keep coming out, but are they just saying just eat stuff you find in nature, directly in nature, and if you do that, you're all right? So it's like it's really complicated, but it's also really simple at the same time. And it's really new, but it's also really old.
Absolutely correct. The more you study this, the more I've been studying this for nearly 40 years. Health has been my passion. And the more you know, the more simple it becomes, the more basic. And that's usually one of the principles that I apply to new innovations or approaches, is that it does it fit with what seems basic, simple, and natural. If it's really exotic and bizarre, and sometimes there's a need for those. Like if you get in extraordinary conditions, just as if you get into an accident, you're going to need conventional care to recover in the intensive care unit. Thank God we have that, but most of the time that's not what we struggle with. That's not what we die from. It's these more common challenges that we have. So, yeah, that's the case. But there is still need for this emerging science, because who would have known that sitting down for long periods of time, even though you were incredibly fit, maybe in the upper 0.1% of fitness in your age group, that you're still exposing yourself to premature death. I mean, that type of information come out unless you're engaged in those types of studies. And there's a simple tweak for it: stand up every 10 minutes. I mean, it's just massively simple. Which just another confirmation of what your statement was, is that the simple things are usually what you need.
Dr. Mercola, certainly, you're pushing 300,000 articles on the web. You're a very, very busy man. Folks have undoubtedly checked out your website. If they haven't, please go do so, Mercola.com. What's next for you?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I hired the person to help me with the gardening. The next area of interest is high-performance agriculture. So it's real. I'm passionate. I'm looking at it as my third career. My first career was a physician. Second was an internet educator, and now third is going to be high-performance agriculture, because that's getting back to the basics. And interestingly, it's the soil health that's so key, and the bacteria especially. And optimizing our gut flora is essentially crucial, and that's one of the things that restricting sugar does. It helps grow the good bacteria. But with the soil too, if you get the good microbes in there and minerals, you can get plant growth that is just shocking. You're talking like blueberries the size of grapes or cherries, radishes the size of baseballs. I mean, it's just shocking. Plant leaves that are growing 400% bigger because they're optimizing their genetic potential. And it's just fascinating. And because we need this type of application into our environment if we're going to be able to reach the optimum, achieve the optimum nutrition from the plants that we're growing. So I'm very excited about this, and I think this is my next career, is understanding and educating people about high-performance agriculture.
Well, it certainly excites me, and I'm sure excites the listeners, because we've seen from experience that when you set your mind and your passion towards something, the sky's the limit. So we're all going to have blueberries the size of grapefruits in a couple of years. I'm really looking forward to that.
Well, not grapefruits. Grapes, not grapefruits.
I think you're underselling yourself. I think when you put your mind to it, we'll be at grapefruits. Well, Dr. Mercola, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, Jonathan. I appreciate it.
Listeners, I hope you enjoyed today's show as much as I did, and please remember, this week and every week after, eat smarter, exercise smarter, and live better. Chat with you soon.
Wait, don't stop listening yet. If you like the podcast and if there's other ways we can help you, please join us in the Smarter Science of Slim support group, which is freely available at the Smarter Science of Slim website, smarterscienceofslim.com. There you'll find all kinds of free recipes and success stories and just all kinds of fun stuff, like how to help your kids go sane and just great community content.
And just one last thing before you go, if you wouldn't mind heading over to iTunes and up onto Amazon.com and leaving us a review, and then going over to Facebook and liking us, we would hugely appreciate it.